Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 1 of Two's a Crowd. My new, it's so embarrassing to call it, podcast or series, because, I don't even know. But, that's sort of the vibe. Basically, every episode, heavy air quotes on episode, I'm gonna have a different topic I talk about, and it's all stuff I basically already talk about on this channel, stuff that no one really cares about, but I care deeply about. So that's sort of the vibe of this whole thing. So for episode 1, I figured I'd start out strong with something that is deeply meaningful to me, which is Nico Di Angelo, of course. So today's episode is going to be basically why Nico is the most powerful demigod there is out of everyone in any of Rick Riordan's books, with a heavy focus on his life between the Titan's Curse to Mark of Athena. Because basically the thesis for this video is I believe he's the most strongest demigod there is, no doubt, because of all of the time he spent in that period of time away from Camp Half-Blood and just on his own, discovering things, trying out new powers, meeting a bunch of gods and people in the mythology world that had he just hung out at Camp Half-Blood he wouldn't have met. It's sort of the idea of at camp you can learn all the training and stuff, but none of it really matters until you go out into the real world, and he basically spent his whole life in the real world, which is why I think he's the most powerful. But I'm gonna go through a whole deep dive of his entire life just to get into this point. So yeah, that's what we're gonna be doing. So first of all, he was born in 1932, legit, January 28th. Yep. And it was him and his sister Bianca and his mom Maria, and then his dad is Hades, but he doesn't know that yet. It's a rare occasion of him and his sister both being full siblings, both born to the same godly parent. Rare, but Hades is different. He's not like the other gods. Whatever. So basically, he's in Italy. He's raised very Catholic and conservative. And then he's taken to the Lotus Hotel and Casino. Him and Bianca are taken together, and they are there for the next 70 70 years, I think, when he's 10 years old. And then they're there for a while. It becomes 2008, whenever the Titan's Curse came out, and he's taken out of the Lotus Casino and he's sent to Westover Hall, which there he's then rescued by Annabeth, Talia, Percy, and Grover, who are we sense that there's demigods here, we need to go save them and take them to camp. So when they're there, Nico is, first of all, obsessed with mythomagic, which is this card game that has characters from Greek mythology on it, which is a joke in the book, but low-key I think it's part of why he's so powerful, because he genuinely knows all of these figures in Greek mythology, and it comes up a few times throughout the series, especially in Heroes of Olympus, I'm pretty sure, of him knowing who people are because he knew mythomagic as a kid. So that's the first important thing. But then basically Bianca joins the Hunters of Artemis because she's I'm a 12-year-old, I'm sick of taking care and raising my little brother, which is valid. But then Nico's sort of left alone, and that's his first step into his dark era. And so yada yada yada, whatever, he gets sent to Camp Half-Blood, and then everyone else pretty much who he's known, Percy, Annabeth is missing at this point, Talia, all those people are all sent on the quest of the Titan's Curse, and his sister is sent as well. So he's just alone at Camp Half-Blood, which I imagine during this time he didn't do that much training. He's 10. I don't know what they really would have had him doing. But if anything, he might have gotten some basic training there. But I don't think that's anything that really contributed to him being the powerhouse that he is. But basically, like, a week goes by, the whole Titan's Curse happens, his sister Bianca dies on the quest. And so when Percy and the whole gang return back to camp, they break the news to Nico, and he freaks out. And just like based on pure emotion, him being a child of Hades, no one knows that he is, but he literally like raises the dead. Like, huge show of power, even as like a 10-year-old who has no training. And I think this just shows that, like, as a child of Hades, he innately has a huge amount of power. Like, all the kids of the big three do. But, like, that's sort of just an important thing to note, that he just, like, baseline has crazy powers. So, yeah. Like, he, like, raises the dead and he gets all angry. And then he runs away. And he runs away from camp. And from this point, we don't really know where he is. And this is my personal belief. From the end of the Titan's Curse, when he runs away, until, like, the Mark of Athena, when he gets saved by the Seven, we know very little about, like, where he was, like, what he was doing. We know, like, basic details of, like, how he gets from point A to point B throughout that time. But ultimately, like, so much was going on, and he was so young, and he was so alone. Like, he had no one with him. It's such a crazy time, and so most of the details in this time are, like, told in, like, brief flashbacks, or, like, in Blood of Olympus, when we get his POV, he reflects on a bunch of these points. So, yeah. But, like, a lot of these are really, like, brushed past in the book, which is why I think we need a new Nico book that is, like, a journal from this period of time, just to get, like, fill in the details. So I feel like there's so much more that could be added to this time. I just love it. So basically, yada yada yada. I'm reading my notes down here. Yeah, so, like, once he leaves camp, he finds Minos, who's a god? I don't know. He has something to do with the underworld. But, with Minos is kind of evil. I think he's, like, majorly evil. I don't remember that much. But, like, throughout that time, he's with Minos, really getting, like, real training. He's becoming stronger with his powers. He can control them more. He gets his Stygian iron sword. Big stuff happening here. He learns how to shadow travel, which is a big point. Basically, Children of Hades, it's basically just, like, teleportation. But it's, like, it really, like, weakens you when you do it. So to go long distances, you have to be, like, very strong. And then he learns how to summon the dead on command. It's, like, huge improvements being made during this time. And so that's all, like, during the end of Titan's Curse to, like, midway through the Battle of the Labyrinth. And also, the first time that we see Nico after he runs away is in a dream or an Iris message. I don't remember. Basically, he is trying with everything that he has to raise Bianca from the dead. And so he's doing a bunch of summonings. He's, like, giving offerings, which is McDonald's. Crazy. And he's, like, he summons Theseus at some point. Like, he's talking to, like, major figures. So he's, like, got crazy abilities at, like, 10, 11 years old. He never successfully summons Bianca, I believe, but this is, like, the first time we see him back and we're like, oh, he's, like, serious. And this is, like, peak, like, dark era. Like, he's really sad and lonely. It's a lot. And so, yeah, so we see that, like, in a vision. I'm pretty sure it's an Iris message, but I feel like it's definitely an Iris message that we see that. But the first time we physically see Nico again in the books is in the Battle of the Labyrinth at the Gerion's ranch, or Triple G ranch, whatever it is, where he is I think he's talking to Girion because he's still just trying to, is that his name? Girion? Yeah. Because he's trying to raise Bianca from the dead, and I think Girion has some info on like how to do that. So he's there trying to figure that out. But like he's just like out in the like he's everywhere. He's done so much. Like it's crazy. Anyway, then the whole like from the Triple G Ranch on in the Battle of the Labyrinth, Nico's with the group, except for at some point he gets taken by Minos because he gets tricked. But then eventually we get to like the peak of the Battle of the Labyrinth, which is when they're in Daedalus's studio. I don't know. It's the part where they're like in something and they crash out the window and they like fly down on Icarus's wings or something. But that's when Nico does the whole Ghost King thing, which is like iconic moment. And so he like raises ghosts and like fights with them in his army. It's like a huge, like he basically like wins them this little battle because he's like so talented. Yeah, and so that's when they're fighting Minos and like a bunch of other like little goobly monsters, and he basically like pulls them all down into the underworld, like into Tartarus. So really cool. Then at that point in Battle of the Labyrinth, they go back to camp to fight the Battle of the Labyrinth, which is like low-key a very overlooked part of that book. Like to me, I never think about like the Battle of the Labyrinth, like the battle. Like I always forget that's part of the book. But whatever. Basically they're fighting this big battle. And in that we see Nico do a bunch of like raising ghosts. He's fighting a telekine. He kills the telekine. It's really crazy stuff. But yeah, he's just like summoning dead all over the place. So it's really cool. Okay, so from that point, Percy and Annabeth are like, Nico, you should stay at camp, like, you're safe here, people want you here, like, we'd love to have you here so we can train with you, all this stuff, and he's like, nah, I'm gonna be going. And so he leaves again, but he's like, at this point they're really, raring up for the big Titan War, which happens in the 5th and final book in the series, which is like the next book. But like they all know that it's coming, but they're like, oh, we don't know how to do this. But Nico has a plan, which he begins to devise at this point in the book, but it's not really revealed until the final book. So yeah, but he's like, I have an idea. And then that's when like he gets invited to Percy's birthday party, and Percy's like, I don't think he's ever been to a birthday party before, and it's so sad. But anyway, yeah. Then we get into the Sword of Hades, which is a little mini book, a companion novel, dare I say, a short story, where nothing really that significant happens, but it is with like Percy, Talia, and Nico. And he goes on this quest. It's something with Persephone, and it's basically, he's like fighting that. He's like, please let me come on this quest, because he is basically using his knowledge of the underworld to help them like crush it, which like that's huge, like in of itself. Like even Percy as a child of Poseidon, he doesn't like know the ocean. He can do his like coordinates thing, but like Nico knows the entire underworld, which is such a powerful thing to have. Like he knows all the little bits and pieces and all the corners and all this stuff. I'm just saying, it's impressive. Also in the Sword of Hades, he says he like shadow travels back or something, and he says that he was in a graveyard in New Orleans, which is like a really random detail, but graveyard in New Orleans, remember that for later, because that I believe is a reference to something that happens later. But yeah, and then at the end of the Sword of Hades, he remains in the underworld, because he's trying to talk to Hades. The thing is, none of the demigods have a connection to their godly parent, really. But Nico does. Like, he's in with Hades. They're like besties, kind of. But like that's a huge thing. Like he can like personally convince Hades to do things, which is kind of impressive. So yeah. Then this is sort of when his next big move in the books is his plan, which he's been teasing for a little bit. But basically the whole thing is that he's gonna get Percy to bathe in the river Styx, which will do sort of, it's like Achilles, how he had the Achilles heel, his one weak spot. That's basically what they would do to Percy. So he would have a single spot where he was, like if he hit it, he would die, but anywhere else he would live like through anything. So that's the T. But he's like, yes, we got to do this. And then he also does a bunch of research on May Castellan because I'm trying to remember. Okay, it's really weird to do the river Styx dip. You need like your mom's permission. I don't know. Like Percy had to get Sally's like verbal permission for him to do it. And so for some reason they need to go and see May Castellan. It's something to do with Luke and like to see if he got permission or something, because they're trying to figure out if Luke got the dip in the Styx as well. And so like even like Nico's doing all this, he's smart. Like he's doing all this research on like trying to find Luke's mom so that they can see if like Luke got the dip in the Styx. And so he finds May Castellan and all this stuff. It's really fun. He also has like a connection with Hestia, who is one of the Olympians. And I don't really remember too much about this part, but I'm pretty sure that like they've spoken before, and like he like again once he's out in the world and he's meeting all these gods and he's making all these connections. He's got like allies out there. It's really cool. I don't know what that says. Burgess with him makes. I got no clue. Oh, bargains. Okay. Another thing is when they do the whole dip in the Styx, he kind of tricks Percy into, because Hades is like, if you bring Percy Jackson to me, I'll give you information about your mom, because at this point Nico doesn't really know stuff. And so he's like making deals with Hades because they've got like this friend, relationship. I don't know. But yeah, he's got like dual motives. Anyway, he even, I think this is after the dip in the Styx, he literally is the reason that Hades helped out in the Battle of Manhattan and helped them defeat the Titans, which is like the big battle of the whole series. So like, because it says, I'm pretty sure this is from Blood of Olympus, this piece, where Nico's like reflecting back on this time, and yeah, like he literally like begged and pleaded, and Hades was like, sure, okay, I'll help. Which was like a huge turning point in the war as well. So yeah, then the whole Battle of Manhattan happens, and they sort of, well, I mean, they win, right? And then he hangs out at camp for a bit, like a few months or a few weeks, like maybe like 3 months. I don't even know if it was that long, but Nico's at camp for a bit. But then at some point, I think in The Sun and the Star, I don't know when he says this. It's either Sun and the Star or Blood of Olympus, where he talks about how like he would hang out at camp, but then he felt like everyone was like when the war happened, they were like, yeah, Nico, like our hero. But then like after a bit, they were like, oh, whatever. But then Will Solus, who we'll get to later, he comes in a bit later. He's like, no, like we were all, like you isolated yourself. We would have loved to have you. So it shows Nico is like sort of getting better. He's not really making friends, but like he's making acquaintances. And so after like Bianca's death, he's recovering a bit, but it's still not great. And so he isolates himself, and then eventually runs away again. He basically is like sort of in and out of Camp Half-Blood. Like he's gone more than he's there though. Like he'll pop in every once in a while, but he's mostly gone. And no one really knows where he is. In The Lost Hero, Annabeth says that he's looking for Percy, but I mean, I guess that's true. Like, but it's not entirely true. But yeah. Whatever. Okay. Right. So then at some point, I think this is in like September of after the Battle of Manhattan, which is like literally August. So like a month after. So I guess he hung out at camp for a month, and then he left to go again find Bianca, which then he discovered that she was not in the underworld anymore because she had chosen rebirth, which this is a whole thing in the universe that when heroes die, they get sent to a certain place. Like you can get sent to the fields of punishment, which are like bad, and then the fields of asphodel, which are just like mid, or you can get sent to Elysium, which is like for heroes. And so if you get sent to Elysium, which Bianca did, you can choose rebirth to get like reincarnated. And then if you get like reincarnated 2 times and then you like live 3 lives and you all get sent to Elysium, you can then go to the Isles of the Blessed, which is like a whole like it's like the next level for like ultimate heroes. So yeah. It's like a whole thing. So she basically chose rebirth, so she's like gone now and he can't ever find her again, not even her ghost. And so when he's down there, he goes to the fields of asphodel and he discovers Hazel Levesque, which turns out she's a daughter of Pluto, which is the Roman form of Hades. And so he's like, my half-sister. And so he saves her because I'm pretty sure he can sense that she died an unfair death, and so he is like, nah, I'm giving you a second chance. And so that's why the whole thing about the graveyard in New Orleans was significant, because Hazel's from New Orleans, and she's dead. So that, like, has to be a reference. Like, there's no other reason he would be a graveyard in New Orleans. Anyway. So now he has revived Hazel Levesque from the dead. Yeah. Really fun. And so as he does this, Hades informs him about this other camp, not Camp Half-Blood, but Camp Jupiter, which is for Roman demigods. And so he goes and he finds the camp and he declares that he's the son of Pluto, and he's like the first demigod to find Camp Jupiter since the I don't know what it's called, but it's like the Half-Blood Civil War, which I don't know what that means, but we need a book on that. Like, what is the Half-Blood Civil War? I assume it's a war between Camp Jupiter and Camp Half-Blood, but like, whatever it was, ever since then, they've been separated. And so Nico's the first to reform that link between the two. And he, like, gets into it. Like, he becomes a senator there. He's got his, like, black toga on. It's so funny. So he's, like, deep into the political atmosphere at Camp Jupiter, which is so funny. Like, I cannot believe Nico Di Angelo being, like, in the Senate meetings, like, making decisions. He's, like, the ambassador for Pluto. Like he's really in it. And so that's why he's sort of like, he comes to Camp Half-Blood for a little bit, but he's mainly at Camp Jupiter. Because he's got like duties to fulfill, which is so funny. And also that's why like when Annabeth is like, oh yeah, he's out looking for Percy. No girl, he's doing his political life. Like, he's not looking for anyone. So yeah. Then basically he when Percy, okay, so in Son of Neptune, Percy arrives at Camp Jupiter, and his memory has been erased. So he's like, he looks at Nico and he's like, oh, you look familiar, but he doesn't remember who he is. And Nico just pretends like he doesn't know him, which is hilarious. Like, honestly, my favorite part of that book. But yeah, that all happens, and then later, it's still at like the beginning of the book, but then they do like war games, which is like the Camp Jupiter version of Capture the Flag, where people like actually die. And so he's watching this from like a tower with like binoculars, which is like so Nico. Um, and he sees that like a kid gets shot like fatally, but doesn't die. Like, or like comes back from the dead or something. And so this is where Nico figures out that the doors of death aren't working right. So there's this whole thing in Tartarus where the doors of death are supposed to be closed, which means that like when you die, you stay dead. But now he basically puts together that Gaia, who's like Mother Earth, who's the whole villain of Heroes of Olympus, he discovers that Gaia and her little like monster friends have opened the doors of death so that like all the monsters that are dead can come back, and then like once monsters get killed, they don't stay dead. You know, they're like back, no problem. So like that's a big problem, you know. So Nico sort of takes it upon himself, again, because he's always doing stuff alone, never shares the plant with anyone. And he's like, I'm gonna go figure this out. So he goes to the underworld on his own, just like, he's like 14 maybe at this point, like maybe 13, like who knows. No, wait, hold on. Let me do the maths. That's like 1, 2, 3. Like he's like 13, I think. And he's like out here going to the underworld alone, going down to like try and find the doors of death. And in this, he eventually gets pulled into Tartarus, which is big ick. Tartarus is basically like the big bad of the underworld. Like it's like inescapable. And so then this whole, in The Sun and the Star, he reflects on this period of time. It's like a whole like big chunk of the book where it's just a memory of him getting pulled into Tartarus and experiencing the whole thing, because it's like deeply traumatizing. And that part of The Sun and the Star is like low-key one of the scariest things that Rick's ever written, because these are like middle grade books, but like that is like spooky. Anyway, so yeah, basically there's a lot of details to it. There's a lot of like evil, like there's Nyx, there's like a bunch of titans, there's like the twins, there's like a bunch of evil goobly-goos that are like harming him. But because I'm just trying to talk about like why he's the most powerful, like we don't need to get into that. But he basically gets thrown into a jar, and he has Persephone's like pomegranate seeds, which basically in doing this, if you eat one seed, it like puts you into what we call the death trance, which means that like in this jar he can have one seed a day and survive like barely. So he's got like 7 seeds, I think. And so the whole Mark of Athena, everyone's like, where's Nico? He's in Tartarus in a jar. Perfect. So they're like, we gotta go find him. And so they have like they have like 7 days to go save him. It's like the whole time frame of that quest. So yeah, he's like surviving in Tartarus, whatever. And then there's this whole thing like when he comes back of everyone, it's like really, like, I brushed past that, but like surviving Tartarus is like the most powerful thing you can do in the books. So like he kind of ate that. But yeah, then from that point on, they save him, obviously. Then he's just sort of with the 7 from the Heroes of Olympus. And then he takes the Athena Parthenos back to Camp Half-Blood as like the link between the 2 camps. And then he meets Will Solis, who eventually becomes his boyfriend. And then he fights in the big battle of Blood of Olympus. He saves Camp Half-Blood. And then from that point on, he's sort of just at Camp Half-Blood. There's this whole thing. Later we find out that he's befriended the troglodyte species, which is like another fun side quest that he did. And then he fights in the Tower of Nero fight, all that helps them. And then The Sun and the Star is the most recent appearance by him, in which him and Will again went through Tartarus and survived. So like he's gone through Tartarus twice, which no one else has ever done. Like Annabeth and Percy went through it once, Will's now been through it once, but he did it twice, which is crazy. Um yeah, but that's basically like up to date. So like essentially with all that being said, Nico's by far the strongest demigod because of all these side quests that he's done where he's like befriending gods, he was befriending the troglodytes, he's like making friends in all these weird places because he feels, I mean this is harsh, but like he feels like such a loner that he's like making connections with all these, it's all the like overlooked gods and overlooked species and like all this stuff where like that's his power, you know, his power is like finding the lonely people. That sounds so dumb, but yeah. And also he can summon the dead, like let's be so real, and he can shadow travel, like yeah. But I just deeply love Nico Di Angelo, and I would love to have more books about him. But yeah, that's all for episode 1. I hope you enjoyed me yapping about Nico Di Angelo. That's all. See you next time. Bye!